We good? Well, hello and welcome to the Englewood City Council. I already forgot what it was called. Candidate Forum. It's right there. I could have just read it. We're so glad that you're here. If you're watching online, welcome. We're glad that you're watching with us. My name is Maggie Burns. I'm a parishioner here at the Sacred Grace. I'm also an Englewood voter, District 1. Woohoo! It's my first year voting in an Englewood election, so I'm very interested and excited to be part of it. It's going to be great. Well, just a reminder, voting day is Tuesday, November 2nd. That's coming up here in just a little less than a month. And the ballots should be hitting your mailboxes anytime within the next week or so, so be on the lookout for those. The purpose of tonight, this candidate forum, is for you, the voters, to get to know the candidates and hear what they have to say about the issues that you are concerned about. We want to be as informed and the best voters that we possibly can be, and this is a great way to get a step up on that. Before we get things started, I want to thank the Women's Voter League for partnering with the Sacred Grace and putting on tonight's event. We really, really appreciate your partnership. Give them a round of applause. Thank you so much. And with that, I will hand things over for our moderator tonight, Jerry Cummins with the Women's Voter League.
Thank you, Maggie. The League of Women Voters is pleased to be here tonight and welcome all of you who will be voting on this fall. In addition to the City Council race, we have 3 statewide ballot issues. There may be other local issues that need to be aware of. There is one countywide issue. It continues the open space sales tax question. So keep those all in mind. You've probably gotten your blue book. You've probably gotten the the book from the county clerk's office. So hang on to those and read them in your spare time. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our panel tonight and also explain to you the format for the evening. So on the far end, we have Chelsea Neunenkamp. She is running for District 2. She is unopposed, I believe. We have Stephen Ward. He is running for District 4. He does have an opponent who is not with us this evening. Her name is Belinda Porter. And we have 2 at-large seats that you will be voting on here in Englewood. The first seat, we have the 2 people running for that position, Jim Woodward at-large, and for Mary Colecki. They're both running for that at-large seat. We also have one other at-large seat that is open, and that is being, Cheryl Wink is running for that position. She is unopposed. So with that, we're going to go over the format for tonight. Each of the candidates will have 1 minute to make an opening statement. And then we will move to questions. If you have not received a card and would like to ask questions, just raise your hand and someone in the back will get to you shortly. They will bring the questions forward and we'll acknowledge your question throughout the evening. We also have questions that have previously been submitted. So with each question, each of the candidates will have an opportunity to respond to the question. All candidates will have an opportunity to respond. They each will get 1 minute. We have timers over here, and they will be giving signals. One is a 30-second one, and you can take a look at that. That's what our candidates will be seeing. They will be, there's a 15-second alert, and that's that one. And the last one, of course, is stop. I have told the candidates they can certainly finish their thought and their question. We won't do a hard and fast stop, but we will ask them to finish that up as soon as they can. So, and after the question and answer session, we will go to closing statements. And again, they will have 1 minute. I did neglect to say that at the end of each of the round of questions, if any of the candidates wish to have a rebuttal, they will each have 30 seconds. So, with that, any questions from our audience? All right, let's go ahead and get started with our opening statements. And I had told the candidates earlier we would start with District 2. and Chelsea Dunenkamp. Go ahead, Chelsea.
Thank you so much to the League of Women Voters and to the Sacred Grace for hosting us tonight. And thank you all for being here, those who are in the room and those who are online. It's such a pleasure to have this evening with you. As you heard, my name is Chelsea. I'm running for District 2, which is the northeast corner of our city. I am a 7th generation Colorado native. I serve on Englewood's Budget Advisory Committee. I have a master's degree in global development, and I currently work for a nonprofit where we're dedicated to reforming our political system to make it more functional and to put the voters first. I have almost a decade of professional policy experience in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors that I'm eager to bring to the city of Englewood for the flourishing of this place that we love. I'm running for city council because I want to preserve what we love about Englewood and make progress for the future. We are at such a critical moment in the history of our city. We have decisions that this next council will make that will impact a generation of quality of life here in Englewood. These challenges are going to take commitment and creativity and collaboration, and I am committed to bringing all of those things to the table because I really believe that Englewood's best days are ahead of us. Looking forward to tonight and to answering your questions and to meeting you afterwards. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Chelsea. Stephen Ward, running for District 4.
Good evening. I'd like to echo Chelsea's thanks to the League and to the Sacred Grace for hosting this event tonight. My name is Stephen Ward. I'm running in District 4, which is the southwest portion of Englewood. I currently serve as an at-large council member. I was appointed by council in March to that at-large seat because of, in large part, my history of public service in the city of Englewood. I've lived in Englewood for the past 10 years. I bought my home here in 2011. From the first day that I moved to Englewood, I wanted to serve the community. I served for 2 years on Englewood's Liquor and Medical Marijuana Licensing Authority, followed by 8 years on the city's Budget Advisory Committee. Also served as chair of the Single Hauler Trash Committee, which was an interim committee set up to investigate the options relative to trash service in Englewood. Currently, I'm at large and I'm running to serve in District 4. I hope that you will vote for me in the upcoming election. I am very interested in continuing what we are doing now, which is civilly engaging in political discourse. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. And let's move on to Jim Ward, running for at-large.
Okay, Jim Woodward.
Woodward, pardon me. Thank you.
I want to thank Sacred Grace, Pastor Nathan Hogue, and the League of Women's Voters for being the host of this forum, and you, the citizens of Englewood, for attending and watching on YouTube. I served on City Council as a council member at large from August 2004 to November 2013, serving 4 years as mayor and 4 years as mayor pro tem. I have lived in Englewood for 43 years and have been involved and committed to community service in Englewood for over the last 30 years. I do have the knowledge, experience, and ability to make tough policy and responsible budget decisions during these trying economic times while focusing on how to maintain a high level of service, city services, and quality of life amenities. I am seeking election because I believe I have exhibited the ability, knowledge, leadership, and desire to serve and represent the citizens of Englewood. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. And let's move to Mary Colecki with her opening statement.
Thank you, Mary Colecki. I want to thank the Women's Voting League, and I want to thank Sacred Grace for hosting this event. My main thing was I felt led that we needed citizens to come to the table to represent Englewood. I was not hearing our voices being heard as much as I should have around there. And I definitely do believe I am passionate about it. In 2008, I had a stroke, so I went to Craig, I survived. Yay, and then I moved here and I fell in love with the community. This is the first community I've ever really engaged in and fallen in love with. I look forward to seeing what happens with the downtown project. There's a lot of really fun things going on there, but I do want to preserve community. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mary. Okay, let's go to our first question, and we'll start with a soft one. What is special about living in the city of Englewood? And we'll start with Steve.
What isn't special about living in the city of Englewood? One of the reasons why I chose to purchase in Englewood when I was looking for my home was that I could afford a house here, and I knew that by comparison, Englewood's smaller population, smaller geographic area, allows people to be a bigger part of the community. I knew that I would have a voice here that I wouldn't have if I had chosen to locate with our neighbor in the north. And the sense of community that we have been building over the last 5 years is also very special here in town. You can meet your neighbors at our city events. You can walk down Broadway once a year. You can watch fireworks at a local park. These are all great things. It's each and every one of you, it's me, it's my neighbors. This is a community. It's a small town that you can be a part of, where you can fit in and share what we love about the city together.
All right, Mr. Woodward.
Well, I think having come from North Dakota, born and raised in a city in North Dakota a little bit larger than Englewood, moving to Denver, living in Denver for 8 years, and then finally finding a house and being able to buy a house in Englewood, and then finding that same small town community type feeling here. Like I said before, I've lived here 43 years. I haven't thought about, and I'm not thinking about, probably ever leaving Englewood. I love the city. I'm committed to the people. I enjoy being involved, and I feel like I've hopefully made some sort of differences over the years. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Let's go on to Mary. What's special about living in Englewood?
What's special is I had a second chance at life. I shouldn't have survived the night. I went to Craig Hospital. They helped me give a little bit of a life back, but I moved down the street to go to therapies. I didn't expect to move into a community that I love so much, that I had a coffee shop in my building, that I had a community garden where I could interact with people and learn how to speak again, where I could go to that coffee shop and learn to read again, and all the people, the wonderful people I can meet along the way. There are so many people that I've run into again and again at meetings and campaigning and things like that, that I had met before and that I continue to meet. And so it's a very engaged community. So I really look forward to all that this has in store. And I look forward to listening and progressing in our community stance.
Thank you, Mary. Chelsea Newnenkamp. What's special?
I like to tell this story that in 1961, my grandparents bought their first house in Englewood on Sherman Street for $10,000. And my mom was born and brought home from the hospital that house. They named her Cindy Ray because they loved the name of the Cindy Ray Apartments on Broadway. And for me, Englewood is about history. It's connected to something bigger than us, right? And also the character of this community. We are a small town wrapped in a city. My unofficial campaign slogan is "Keep Englewood Quirky," right? We love that about this city. We love the cohesion that we experience. And this is also a place where you have opportunities to be creative, to innovate, where we attract kind of a gritty part of you have to have a little bit of grit and innovation to be in this community, and there's so much opportunity for citizens to make real change in Englewood, which is such a powerful part of our community, but those things do not happen by accident. And so it is important that we continue to invest in the programs and the events and the attractive city that we love to be able to keep that strong sense of community that we love.
Thank you, Chelsea. All right, the next question, and we'll start with Mr. Woodward. What are the challenges facing the city of Englewood?
Well, it's interesting. We being a first-tier suburb of Denver, like many other first-tier suburbs, there's some real benefits and there's some real distractions from those benefits. Benefits are you're not right in the city. You are in something outside the city. We have this small town feel. We have control, lots of control over what we're doing as a community. Some of the big challenges that I've noticed with Englewood going on right now, and I'll just read some of my goals. Sustain responsible annual and long-term budgets. We've done that. Ensure city plans to address water, taste, and hardness issues are completed in a timely manner. That's one of my big goals. Increase service levels to maintain safe, clean, and attractive city, which is dealing with streets, alleys, code enforcement, and all of those things. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary Colecki.
I think some of the biggest challenges are the homeless. We seem to have, and there's some issues in the parks, including Jason Park. I do realize that with COVID, I had my community, and the Jason Park community is a beautiful community, and I really want to keep it intact. And that was just one example to me of how things are getting messed up in this, or not messed up, but they're being impinged upon in our community to limit people's choices and things like that. So I do believe the homeless, which I have connected with Movement 5280, and they are working with Safer, and they have released the whole needing to have I'm learning a lot about that. So we're getting more people into the Safer program. I also believe that we need to deal with the flooding situation, and I feel that council has moved in positive motions with that. I do believe that we do need that. Thank you so much. I'm out of time.
Thank you, Mary. Let's go to Chelsea Newnenkamp.
So I think our number one issue is going to be attainable housing. We need a range of attainable housing options in this city so that this can still be a place where you can buy your first home just like my grandparents. It's not going to cost you $10,000 anymore, but it should be something that you should be able to still have a starter home in Englewood. We need this for our nurses at Swedish, the teachers in our schools, the workforce that we have in this city so that it can be sustainable and stable for our small business owners. So we have to address that. The Title 16 rewrite is going to be a huge part of that and how we think about creating housing in our city. We also need to make sure we have a vibrant local economy so that we can generate enough sales tax to address the underlying issue that we will always have, which is infrastructure. So how do we make sure that we can walk and chew gum, we can deal with pressing issues and long-term plans at the same time?
Okay, thank you. Stephen.
So as I've been walking, canvassing my neighborhood, I've heard about three things by and large: homelessness, water, and growth. I think those are probably the three biggest challenges facing the city of Englewood right now, and the current council is working on all of those. We joined the Tri-City Homelessness Initiative. We're making progress towards helping homeless people who want help, who are willing to work or to make a change in their situation. Water infrastructure is ongoing. I talked to the utilities director Monday night. He expects that we should have some major improvements sometime within the next 3 years. You've probably all seen that change on your water bill as well. And growth, growth can be managed. We have a committee right now working with planning and zoning that is working on rebuilding or recodifying the development code in the city. There are places in the city where we still can grow, and there are places in the city where we want to stay the same. There's a balance to be had. I will add lastly, for my part, I think that constructive civil engagement is a challenge in Englewood and has been for some time. I have worked very hard to engage constructively with people who agree and disagree with me. And I think that we should expect the same of our citizens and our residents in the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, it's time for Mary's turn to start. Why do you want this job as a city council member? And the same for the rest of you. Why do you want to be a city council member?
I felt like I needed to get involved from the lockdowns. I felt very, very strongly, and I was pretty much dragging my feet. But when people's communities are being impinged on, I went to the Lord, and then I talked to a good friend, and she said that she had talked to somebody who had mentioned to her, you should run for city council. And I had been talking with God about that how do I get involved with politics? Because I wanted to make a difference. And he called me to this, and I'll be honest, it scared me. Let's be real. To speak for such a huge demographic, I have to sit down and listen and listen and listen. And I give everybody major credit on the council, but I also feel like I could bring another voice to the table that can definitely be a strong voice for the citizens.
Thank you. Let's go on to Chelsea Newnenkamp. District 2, why do you want this job?
So I'm a civics teacher at heart and a civics nerd. And so when I saw that my seat was open, I thought, man, I hope someone really great runs for that. I hope someone else does that job for us. And then I realized that maybe no one else was going to do it. And if I am going to practice what I preach, then maybe I should throw my hat in the ring and be able to represent my neighbors. This is called public service for a reason, not public opportunism, right? And so that's the perspective that I'm bringing into this work. How do we create something in this city where everyone can thrive, where we preserve what we love and we welcome newcomers into a place that we know is a great place to live? I am excited about the future of Englewood. We have so much opportunity, and if I can be a conduit to helping our citizens thrive in this place, I'm all for doing that. So I'm ready to listen, I'm ready to work together.
Thank you, Chelsea. Stephen.
For me, this is the culmination of 10 years of dedicated service to the community. Over the course of that 10 years, I worked with numerous city councils, and I saw them from time to time make decisions that I didn't always agree with, for reasons that I didn't always agree with. So I think service on city council, to me, helps. It's an opportunity for me to help change some of the culture. One of the things that we hear is that's the way we've always done things. I've heard that a number of times, even since I just came onto council. I don't agree with that's the way we've always done things. I want things done right. I want things done the best way. And service on city council is an opportunity for me to influence that. So that's why I'm running for city council.
Thank you. Jim Woodward.
Thank you. I'm going to read mine. My desire to serve as your citizen rep on city council stems from my commitment to the community and a desire to be involved in the decision-making process in the city. Having participated extensively in volunteer work with youth in the city's boards, commissions, and other civic activities, I have a broad awareness of the community's needs and desires. This broad awareness will help guide me with the difficult and fiscally responsible decisions, which will be balanced with the need for effective, efficient services and quality of life amenities. My past experience on council has impressed upon me the necessity of a prompt response to Englewood citizens and businesses. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I neglected in the first few questions to ask if there's a rebuttal anywhere in here. So if you want to, just let me know. And my apologies on the others. All right. This one goes, we'll start with Chelsea on the far end, running for District 2. As a council member, you will be responsible for approving and overseeing the use of the city budget. What are some budget priorities you have that will ensure a healthy use of funds in Englewood?
I love this question. I have had the privilege of serving on Englewood's Budget Advisory Committee for the last 2 years, and I chair that committee currently. And let me tell you, there is no better prep to serve on City Council than being knee-deep in our budget for a couple of years. We have incredible opportunities in our city, and I am very grateful for city staff who I do think make a tremendous effort to use taxpayer and citizen resources in a responsible manner and to pursue other funding opportunities like grants from the federal and the state level. We are going to have to be able to address have the agility to address near-term needs, which we need to be able to address through supplementals and things that happen quickly, but then also have a very strong strategic plan where we have long-term funding priorities, and then all of that needs to be done with a high level of transparency. I support the city bringing on more grant writers to ensure that we can bring in more revenue from non-traditional places, and also want our citizens to be completely read into our budget process as much as humanly possible.
Thank you. Stephen.
Oh my gosh, the budget. 8 years on the Budget Advisory Committee. And over the course of those 8 years, we saw improvements in the way the city handled its funds. But one of the biggest things that we did recently was, shortly after I came onto council, we passed an $11.9 million budget supplemental to start digging on infrastructure that needed improvement. Over the past years, we had $12 million in the bank that we could spend on that infrastructure, and nobody was doing it. One of the things that I'm most proud of is breaking that logjam. A structured system for managing our reserves. The budget, every year, we project our revenue and we project our expenditures. And if our revenue comes in higher than our expenditures, that's a surplus. That surplus traditionally was getting tucked away in a bank account and not getting spent. I support a structured system where in lean years, we can spend more than we take in because we have reserves. And in strong years, we have a system by which we spend some of the surplus and we tuck away some of the surplus for lean years. That's what my next goal is for the city's budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim Woodward.
Thank you. I have, throughout my career, as a commercial real estate office leasing agent and property manager of office buildings. Ended my career 7 years as a director of leasing for a company with 1.3 million square feet of office space. We had to do annual budgets. We did those annual budgets, the leasing, property management, and then the company itself. Very involved in that for years. Also, 8 years of being on council, I'm familiar with budgets. I'm kind of a nerd for numbers and get involved very much in the number crunching and that sort of thing. I want to also go along with Steve and mention that I think it's time to look at spending some of these reserves on some of this infrastructure, especially looking at the later fund, long-term asset reserves. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary Colecki.
I believe there are very creative ways to create money for our community. I was on a committee that was I was appointed by Governor Hickenlooper. We looked at how we could take these tickets that were being used for handicap violation parking, and we took that money, we split it in half with the cops, and then we took the other half and we gave it back to nonprofits that were going to support the disability community. And I believe that we can do creative things like that to create revenue here, including the downtown project going on with just TIFs that are coming out of those buildings that are being built from the ground up. I believe everybody should want to move into our city and create and want to be. Thank you.
Go ahead and finish your sentence.
And we should be able to get the revenue from those TIFs, and that's a way that we won't impact the electors.
Thank you, Mary. Okay. Is there any rebuttal on this issue? Budget, spending money, finance, the whole spectrum? If not, we'll go on to the next question. And Steve, this will be for you, and this is sort of a short, easy question if you know yourself. Are you a data-driven leader when it comes to the making of important decisions? Are you a data-driven leader when it comes to the making of important decisions?
Yes, but I think that's a subjective question. You have to evaluate the data. Data comes from multiple sources. You talk to people, is that data? Maybe, maybe not. You take a survey, is that data? Maybe not, maybe not. Is that survey valid? Maybe, maybe not. Ultimately, making decisions is exercising your judgment. You take in the information that is available and you evaluate that information, and then you make the plan and you execute it. So yes, I believe I'm data driven, but that means different things to different people. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Jim Woodward, how about you?
I agree with Steve on that, and I think there's some relevant data that comes in, and it's what you're asking for and how you're asking for it. You know, if you're polling, that sort of thing, and doing surveys, there are certain scientific ways of doing that, and the feedback you get, some of it is more legitimate than other. So yes, data, you know, if you see trends, let's say in budgets or in revenue, that sort of thing, that's real stuff and you've got to pay attention to it. So in making decisions, you do take a look at data and hopefully you can fully understand it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary Colecki.
I am definitely a data nerd in that I'm looking for holes. So what are they trying to find with this data? What are the numbers they're going for? I love numbers. I love numbers. But there's always there's drive behind those numbers, and I look for what goes behind it, and then I try to look one step deeper and how can I use this to help me with getting people out of nursing homes, for example. It's cheaper to get people out of nursing homes and keep them in the community than it is to keep them in nursing facilities. So that's what I love about policy or about data, is I can look at it and go many layers deep and just see it for what it is and bring humans into the picture, because it's just numbers.
Thank you, Mary. Okay, Chelsea, how about you?
Yes, data is incredibly useful when we're talking about public policy, right? And I agree with my co-panelists here that not all data is created equal, and so that needs to be thought of in a very contextual manner. But the data, some of the data that I'm the most interested in is data from other municipalities. So I want Englewood to be innovative, but we do not need to recreate the wheel here. There are other cities across Colorado and across our country that are experiencing the exact same challenges we are. And so I'm incredibly interested in a collaborative approach where we can look at the data from those municipalities to say, how did their homelessness initiatives work? How did they fund their infrastructure? How did they create a range of attainable housing, right? That's incredibly useful to us so that we can move faster for citizens here in Englewood.
Thank you. Any rebuttals along the way here? Okay, let's see. We'll start with Jim with this one. All right. Englewood has a zoning conundrum. We need to adapt.
Sorry, would you repeat that? They have
Certainly. Englewood has a zoning conundrum. We need to adapt to increasing population, but the sort of multi-dwelling housing that is going up is outside the price range of the income spectrum of most Englewood residents. What can you do on council that will increase both population density and affordable housing at the same time? So we'll start with Jim, and then we'll go to Mary and around the corner.
Well, affordable housing is out of the range of most people that live in Englewood right now. Right now, most people probably couldn't buy the homes that they're in if they're in homes. I am a proponent of affordable housing. Steve had mentioned the rewriting and updating of the Unified Development Code. Hopefully there will be some changes there. At least I will be advocating for some changes in that in new buildings. The buildings that are the density, going back to my term and formerly in office, we had looked at the rail lines, the medical district, and written those up as the density places. Our single-family housing zoning is need some changes, but they're fairly secure. Single-family houses, you're not going to get, you know, a high-rise next to you. You may get one across the street if you're in a certain zone, but you're at the edge of that zone. Thank you.
This is a tough topic to deal with in 1 minute. So let's go on to Mary Colecki.
I do believe we need to find things such as grants and things like that that will help us bring in more, make these housing more affordable for people. I do believe that these multi-dwelling houses are huge and that they might not work for they're not going to work for everybody, and I've just seen the ones by my garden go up and do all those things. And so I really do believe it is an issue that we do have to tackle. But I do believe that housing in general, we got to find creative things like grants, and we have to maybe go for other creative ways of managing this, because Englewood is in trouble like everybody else in the greater Denver area. So this really does need to get handled.
Okay. Let's go on to Chelsea.
All right, there is so much here. So what we're talking about, this Unified Development Code, it's also referred to as Title 16 in the City Code. It hasn't been comprehensively rewritten since 2004, so it just hasn't kept pace with the needs that we have in our city. It's going to be, I think, the biggest project for council probably around the next 18 months, and where I want to start hitting the ground running and get up to speed as quickly as possible, because it's not sexy, it's code, but it's how we're actually going to address affordable housing in our communities. Things I'd like to take another pass at is our accessory dwelling unit ordinance, which we passed recently. I think we can make some tweaks there to actually make it more functional. I'd like to look at definition of a household. So right now in Englewood, only 2 unrelated persons can live in a house together, which that means you can't have more than 1 roommate. So I'd like to look at that. I'd also like to look at our demolition permits in the city. How easy is it to scrape a house that could be a starter home for a young family you're putting in a $600,000 duplex on each side? And then where do we prioritize the new development so we can unlock purchasable units for our citizens? We need to address blight and areas where we can redevelop first.
Thank you. Stephen.
Every time I have to go after Chelsea, I just want to say what Chelsea said. But beyond that, for me, it's about balance. There are places in the city that lend themselves to higher density development. Areas like downtown Englewood, the city center area, the medical district. And there are places in the city where higher density development makes people very uncomfortable. I found this canvassing my district, which is largely single-family residential with some apartment complexes on the south side. People live in those apartment complexes. What do you call the person who lives in the $650,000 duplex next door to you? Your neighbor. That's what you call them, because that's what they are. We provide places, expensive and inexpensive, for people to live, and they will come to the community, and they will engage in the community, and they will be members of our community, possibly for years to come. So I'm all for building additional housing, but there needs to be a balance. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Any rebuttal comments? Jim?
Make a comment, I guess. 10 years ago, we were looking at, and one of our goals were to upgrade some of the housing in Englewood. During the recession, we had the neighborhood stabilization program going on that was fixing up and repairing, remodeling homes that had gone through foreclosure, and some of them were pretty beat up. The city took on that with federal money and repaired a lot of those homes. I see a stop sign in my... Now
So
stop.
working on it, okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Let's see, where are we? The last one Jim started, so I guess Mary, you get the next question. And this is sort of along the same vein. There are vacant commercial spaces in key areas around Englewood. Civic Center, South Broadway, the medical district, and so on. What can you do on council to help entice businesses to start or relocate in Englewood?
I believe that managing the homeless situation and that there is kind of a gang and drug problem, I think like trying to work on that would be a great idea. I also believe that when we show them how great our community is, which is all these events that we do and things like that, and when we start to show them that we are a community worth coming to, I mentioned the TIF, but that TIF for you to come in and build from ground up, they'll be investing back in our community for as long as they have the property, and that is going to be huge for us. So we want them to know that we want them, and we are worth it. We can't be giving away our land like we have been. So we need to develop those areas. I live in the Civic Center, and I see a whole bunch of possibility there. That's pretty awesome for accessibility and for people just traveling to downtown and then coming back to our community. So I see a whole bunch of potential there.
Thank you. Chelsea.
So what businesses need to thrive in Englewood is customers. And we get that through more rooftops. So City Center is a great example. There simply weren't enough rooftops built when that redevelopment happened to sustain the commercial space there. That, partnered with the online shopping increase, made it incredibly difficult to thrive in that space, and I do think that the new plan has ways of addressing that. We are a small city, right? We do not have the financial ability to give huge incentives to bring in, to coax people into our city the way that other cities do. But what we do have is an incredible economic development team run by Darren Hollingsworth. And they have the ability to give grants to businesses that are homegrown right in our community. And I think that's our sweet spot. We are a place for innovators in Englewood. I am the daughter of small business owners, and I would love to see our home-based businesses transition into those storefronts, utilizing our small business grants through the economic development program here in our city. I think that's a completely untapped resource, and I'm really excited to partner with that community.
Okay, Stephen.
We're doing a fair number of things already to support business in Englewood. Recently, the city formed the Englewood Downtown Development Authority. One of the privileges I've had since I came onto council was to select the board members for that organization. We have a great board set up. A lot of plans for the central part of the city, from city center through to Swedish and the medical district. I look forward to seeing what happens, particularly in downtown Englewood, as they start their work. The other thing is something that was mentioned by several other candidates, which is people. Businesses need people. As I talk to business owners and I talk to developers and I talk to even residents sometimes, the businesses want to be where the people are. So their business and housing can grow together. It's a symbiotic relationship. If we add density to places where density fits, the businesses will go there. I really look forward to seeing the city center pop as more rooftops go there and more businesses move in. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Let's go on to Jim Woodward.
I think the big one is city center and what's going to happen down there. And lessons learned, there isn't room for big boxes. Big boxes are kind of going out unless they're in big developments. We do not have the land for big developments. We're looking at smaller. From a real estate point of view and from a population and who you're trying to find to use these stores, we're in a smaller community. That's why Cinderella City went away, because there were some big shopping centers, Southwest Plaza and others, that opened up, and they took down Cinderella City very quick. The UDC is going to help, but we're going to have small businesses in Denver, or in Englewood, small retailers. Weingarten, when they did City Center, some of that first floor stuff down there that never did get rented should have been, in my opinion, converted to residential, first floor residential. They weren't going to do that because it was worth more vacant in doing cap rates and that sort of things to show investors what it's worth, then do something like turn it into residential. Thank you.
Thank you. Rebuttal time. Rebuttal time for all of you. Ms. Colecki used a term that I'm not sure everyone is familiar with. She used the term TIF, tax increment financing. Do you want to just expand on that just a little bit in a rebuttal or a comment time? Tell us what that is.
Well, I have just learned about it since starting to join the city council meetings, but it seems to be something very beautiful. And the TIF is actually going to be where there's 2 Swedish buildings being built from the ground up, and those buildings will, in 2 years, will have a tax on them. And that tax money will be redistributed back into all the communities, including downtown, the medical district, and the civic center. And I think that's a great way for, I've been told to stop, so awesome.
It's basically an incentive to a developer to explore development, and the city grants a certain tax abatement, if you will, until
May I?
Steve wants to talk about that. Okay.
Sorry,
this is rebuttal
I had to stop
time.
you with that description because that's actually not entirely correct in the way
Okay.
we're using TIF financing. Tax increment financing is pretty technical and difficult to express in 30 seconds, so I hope I'll have a little grace here in explaining it. But essentially what it is a means of borrowing against future revenues under the theory that when development occurs, revenue will increase in the area where the development occurs. So what we do is we take a baseline tax revenue number from the year when we pass the TIF, and that sets the baseline for the revenue. And then rather than going into city coffers where it normally would go in future years, anything above that baseline goes to pay our city's commitment to pay off whatever loans or bond dollars we draw off of that TIF. So it's a technical way of borrowing against future assets without charging a new tax. That's a TIF.
Thank you. Jim?
So, in retail, for example, what happens if it's voted and approved? It's going to increase what they're taxing. And that tax is going to go to pay off loans to improve or whatever, or to do what they're doing there. So there's going to be an increment. The increment is the difference between the city's tax and what they are taxing.
I think Mr. Woodward just made reference to a PIF, or a public improvement fee, which is what we pay at River Point at Sheridan, which is a surcharge on the bill to pay off other bonds. That is different than a TIF. A TIF is not a new tax. A TIF is simply a means of paying with new revenue generated from new business activity, either property tax or sales taxes that didn't occur previously in the district. So there's a difference between those two concepts.
All
It's
right.
TIF. I'm sorry. I let my hearing aids go years ago when I was off council.
Going on to our next question, and this one we'll start with Chelsea Neunenberg. What infrastructure improvements do you feel are most important to Englewood that you will pursue on the council? Infrastructure improvements.
So here's a fun story for you. The very first night I started knocking doors for my campaign was the night that the boil advisory went into effect. And I got a lot of very fresh reactions from my neighbors about how they felt about having to boil their water. And it was a scary 24 hours, right? 48 hours. It was not a fun time. Glad to know that I think the city handled it incredibly well, but it just was an underscore of the work that we have to do on our sewer and water systems, right? We need to do massive repairs in that area. We need to replace old pipes. We need to consider covering the ditch so that we can have better taste, odor, and and hardness in our water. And so that's the number one thing I'm hearing from citizens that they care about in infrastructure. Yes, sidewalk improvements, yes, road repairs, yes, bridges, but our water has been something that we've kind of always known was a problem, but kind of kicked the can down the road. We have a great plan from Director Van Rye, and I'm committed to making sure it has the funding so that it can be successful.
Okay, Stephen Ward.
Water, stormwater, and sewer. Fortunately, we've already broken ground on a lot of those improvements, and you're seeing that on your bill when you pay your bill every month. For the preceding 20 years, we did not plan for or make improvements to that infrastructure. And so the citizens today are being asked to pay 20 years of past dues on improvements to that infrastructure. And unfortunately, just because it's expensive doesn't make it any less necessary. I had a conversation with the city manager just a couple of weeks ago about how much I don't like driving Englewood's roads and knowing where my city ends and the next one begins based upon the condition of the road. So I would say that the other thing that we need to be doing better is regularly maintaining highly traveled roads to ensure that they're not covered with potholes. That's also going to require money, but we do have money dedicated to road improvements, and we just recently completed a survey of all the roads in Englewood, which will help inform our decisions on roads in the future.
Thank you. Mr. Woodward.
I agree. Water is number one. And the 3-year plan of piping water from the wells under the city ditch back up to the water treatment is the beginning. Then putting in the softening devices so we improve our water taste and hardness. And I think we all know about that. Streets. Streets is something that has really drastically changed. It used to be that I'd be proud to drive from Denver down into Englewood because when I hit Englewood, it was smooth sailing, or coming from Littleton. Now, it's bump, bump, bump. I asked the city manager, are we turning into a virtual city? Are we becoming something like a Centennial or something where everything is contracted out and our public works isn't doing this stuff? The other big one is alleys. Alleys have got to be addressed. So utilities, streets, and alleys, which are part of public works, are the big ones for me.
Okay, thank you. And Mary Colecki.
Yes, so I believe that the water situation is very important. One thing I have been in campaigning is people have been talking about the floods from 2 years ago, and they're upset. They're like, this is going to happen again. And I know with how desertification is going, how we're losing topsoil and how everything's just washing away, that the next flood's going to be more impactful. So what do we do to change that? I believe that the Flow project is going in the right direction and going to make huge improvements. But I do believe that also, in talking to Peter, in finishing that pipe from Chatfield, so the water is improved highly in that respect, and in addition to everything that's been talked about here, I didn't know we didn't have that completed yet. That's going to make a huge difference. So I'm glad we're putting in the time to complete that.
Thank you all. Rebuttal time. Any comments?
And I want to just reiterate, I don't think I got mentioned sewers. I think, in my opinion, there is climate change. It's happening. The flood of a couple years ago could happen again any summer, any spring, and it could be much worse. And it's been kind of happening all over the planet. So there's got to be a plan. It can't all go to storm drainage right away, I don't think. We just don't have that kind of money. So I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you. I'm going to combine a couple questions here because they are so related. And this one will start with Stephen Ward in District 4. What do you think of the current direction of the city? And what direction would you pursue as a council person? What would you change, improve, or get rid of in the city?
I think the city is moving in a really good direction. Some of you may remember my campaign from 2019. I had a lot to gripe about in 2019 that I don't have to gripe about today because we are moving in a good direction. We've broken ground on a lot of projects. We're working well together as a council. We're building community every day. Things are moving in a good direction. Over my time in Englewood, I have worked with 4 different finance directors, 3 different city managers, and more city council members than I can count on my hand. And by far, I think the crop that we have now is the best of the bunch. So I am really looking forward to serving Englewood for the next 4 years, to continuing the progress that we're making, and to increasing council's accountability to what the municipal code requires of the council. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Woodward.
I think that over the last 2 years, council has really moved forward and stepped it up. And I compliment them on the handling of the pandemic in our city. That was an excellent job, I thought. I also have seen some of these things like what has happened with the Broadway Block Party. We never thought we could do that when I was on council. Other things, I think what I would want to do is continue in the direction that it's going. And as other things come up, start addressing those as a plan and moving forward. Keep the momentum that we've got over the last 2 years moving.
Thank you. Mary.
Yeah, I am going to completely throw a curveball here. I think we need to go back to the citizens. I think we truly need to be more in tune with the citizens. We need to find a different, not a different, but a more impactful way, which is I will go back to my citizens. Since I know very little about all of this, I'm going to use my citizens as my subject matter experts. I know a lot about my community garden. That doesn't mean I know a lot about all community gardens. I know a little bit about Jason Park and how much I enjoy going and community there. I also believe we need to go back to our citizens for their choices and their real decisions, because I do not believe mandates should be an issue, or I don't believe that should be something that our citizens get brought on them. So I do want to throw that curveball out there and say nothing should be mandated.
Thank you. Chelsea.
Really excited about the direction that Englewood is going. My mom still talks about Cinderella City like it was yesterday, and Cinder Alley. It sounds like it was a great place. But I think we are on the cusp of like a new era in the city of Englewood, and I am so excited about the opportunity to be part of what that looks like for our community. We have amazing things. I will echo my panelists here. We have momentum. We are instituting programs that I think are really, really important. And I'm running also, interestingly enough, as someone who represents kind of this new generation in Englewood, right? A lot of young families are moving into the city, and my goal will be to ensure that they are brought into the story of who Englewood is, and that as our density increases, that our community cohesion programs and outreach increase at the same level. Those things have to be in parallel to ensure we keep our small town feel. And so I want to focus on community engagement, citizen engagement, that strong sense of belonging and placemaking that we all enjoy for our new neighbors.
Thank you, Chelsea. Okay, homelessness. Stephen, you get the first question.
On some of this.
Sure. I'm sorry.
Specifically on what Mary had mentioned. We are receiving COVID money from the federal government, ARPA funding. These are some of the suggestions, and this came up in a study session, I think it was 2 weeks ago. what we're receiving is 7.8 million, I believe it was, dollars. Infrastructure, which was, don't do that.
Just let him go. You can have my time.
I'm going to suggest that
Council
you-
strategic plan, $4.2 million going to infrastructure. Sustainability, energy efficiency pilot program, $200,000. Local business staff recruitment bonus program, $50,000. Vaccine navigation and incentive program, $30,000. Street improvements, $1 million. Sidewalk and ramp gap construction, $250,000.
Okay.
So some of that came from community input on what was out a pole or whatever out on next door and out into the community. That's where some of that feedback came from.
Thank you. Stephen, homelessness. You get the first question. And I'm going to combine a couple of questions here because it's the same topic. The Tri-City Homelessness Policy Group commissioned the Denver University Center for Housing and Homelessness to conduct an assessment of family homelessness and chronic homelessness in Englewood, Littleton, and Sheridan. A Tri-Cities homelessness action plan has been created based on these assessments. What steps do you support to address family homelessness and chronic homelessness? And then the other question is, what do you think is the first step in approaching the issue of homelessness?
I addressed a little bit of this earlier. I support the Tri-City Homelessness Initiative. One of the things about homelessness is that not everyone who is homeless wants to be homeless. And in as much as we can provide help to the people who don't want to be homeless, we are doing our duty to the community. It helps everyone when we get homeless people off of the streets and into housing. One of the challenges that Englewood faces right now relative to homelessness is that there are homeless criminals out there, chronically homeless people who regularly commit either petty offenses or sometimes not so petty offenses, things that generally agitate the community. And when we go to deal with those people, we can't generally incarcerate them in jail right now. So there are homeless people who have 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 tickets out there with warrants, all kinds of paper on them, and the jail won't take them because of the situation with COVID and the lack of jail capacity and other things. So I think it's not generally a problem that we can solve with government, but the Tri-Cities initiative is a step in the right direction to help the people who we can help.
Okay. Jim Woodward, homelessness.
Homelessness, I think the homelessness problem is, number one, larger than we believe it is. And going back to something that actually Mayor Hickenlooper at the time and I sponsored out at Arapahoe in Jefferson County for the cities around here, all the mayors and county officials. And we were talking about homelessness. They came back with each county talking about how many homeless they had, that sort of thing. Arapahoe County came back with, well, we're not aware of many homeless people. And I stood up and said, what? What are you talking about? Have you ever been down by the Platte River around Englewood? There's kids in Englewood living in cars. There's kids on South Broadway going to our schools, living down there. That's their permanent address, or that's their address. I shouldn't say permanent, because it's paid by the week. That's as permanent as they've seen. So there's a big problem, and it's housing is the very big thing that has to be started with. From the data that I see, that's where you start.
Thank you. Mary.
So I was very interested in hearing when Dave Cuesta asked the question, so how many affordable housing units do we have in Englewood? And how many vouchers have we given away? The amount of vouchers we've given away is 3 people have applied for those, and it's something dismally small like that. So if we work out where those multi-dwelling fair housing units can be temporarily utilized, I feel like that's a better use of that space for getting our community back on its feet, and maybe sponsoring how we can get people back into transitioning their families back out of their cars and back into the community in a healthy way. I mean, 3 vouchers in how many years? So that was very dismal numbers for me to hear. I am so shocked at the fact that we have had so many units that we could possibly be using. So, and I know that it's gonna be hard, but that's the kind of things I like to do, is think outside the box and figure that out.
Thank you. Chelsea.
So for me, the first thing to think about when we think about our unhoused neighbors is to think of them as just that, our neighbors. They live in this city with us. The gentleman who was killed last week in our city, his memorial service is tonight over at Movement 5280. That community is grieving tonight in our city. And so we have to think about this in a holistic way and remember that they are members of this community and we should treat them as such. I do support the Tri-Cities Action Plan. I think a lot of really thoughtful work and that data has gone into that plan, and I support it. Key things out of that plan that I'm incredibly interested in is transitional housing. So we have a lot of folks who are staying in motels night to night down on South Broadway. I want us to look at that. We need a coordinating regional body, right? So Change the Trend has built an incredible amount of trust in this community, modeling what collaboration can look like for other regions. And so that may be an opportunity there. And we need to figure out how we can work together more so that we can work by multiplication versus just addition. So a lot of great service providers. How do we coordinate to actually provide more services to our neighbors?
Thank you. Rebuttal time. Rebuttal. Any other comments? Mary.
Yes. So my friend was working with 5280 to help get that gentleman off the streets, and so she was working with the SAFER program. And the SAFER program was set up so people with criminal backgrounds had to have an open case. But she has worked with them, and the city, the person working with the city has helped open it up so that they don't have to have an open case. So I do believe that we are moving in the right direction. I do believe it was a tragedy, and that's community that like Chelsea was saying that.
Anybody else? Mr. Woodward.
Yeah, I want to address the vouchers, Section 8. A reason, I served on Englewood Housing Authority for years as the liaison from council. The reason for 3 vouchers is because all the rest of the vouchers are being used. That's 3 that have turned over in the year or in that period. There isn't any more after 3. So there's a waiting list. If you want to be on the waiting list, it's quite long. It's probably years out. So that's why there's only 3. And that would be a little ahead of the city to get more vouchers, or a little higher than the city.
Okay. This is a topic we could spend the rest of the evening on easily, I'm sure. Let's see, whose turn is next? Mr. Woodward, you're up next. The city wants to streamline services by using one trash company. How do you feel about this possible change? One trash company.
The Englewood Trash Company, I guess. I don't know. This is something that comes up every 10 years, about every 10 years, and after so much time, it goes away. Then it comes back up. I don't know what the outcome of it is going to be. There's so many questions. Alleys, streets. Well, some streets don't have alleys, so it's going to be streets there, continue to be streets. There's less trash companies than there was because the smaller ones have been merged into the larger ones? I don't know what the answer there is. And to get a consensus from the citizens is pretty difficult. We haven't been able to do it in the past, so I'm on a wait and see on that.
All right, thank you. Mary, One Trash Company.
Yes, so I've heard some very positive things from citizens saying maybe we should go with 3 or 4, and then that way if one falls out, then we're going to be, the other ones can cover the ground and things like that. I'm all about choices. I feel like people should have individual choices in who picks up their trash, where they pick it up, what like recycling they want to pay for, and those kind of things. So I do believe that it is worth looking into to see what we come up with, and that if we look for better things, like maybe we could start something where people can start a collective where they just pay for us, the city, to manage it, but then people could still have their choice of who and what they want done with their trash.
Thank you. Chelsea.
So I know that Steve is chomping at the bit to answer this question, so I'll make this fast. Listen, there's a lot of benefits to single hauler, right? So less traffic on our streets with only one trash truck going by and then 3 or 4 on all different days of the week. That goes back to our infrastructure problem, those potholes that we don't like. Also, the emissions of that much traffic coming through our community. And then also, is there a possibility with a city contract of it actually being cheaper for citizens, which would be a huge win. Now, if we're gonna pursue this, we need to make sure that there are real assurances that there would be a long-term savings for citizens to make sure that it would be worth what we're going through to determine this. And it has to include citizen input, right? We have to try to reach a consensus with as many citizens as possible. This is the job, to make hard decisions, right? And to deal with sticky issues. People care about trash a lot. And so we have to kind of put our heads down and really get to the bottom of this, but I do think that there's some really positive outcomes.
Okay, Stephen.
So I hope the moderator will do me a favor and read that question again without using any of my time. Just reread the question, because the way this question is worded is actually very important.
The city wants to streamline services by using one trash company. How do you feel about this possible change? And then I'm combining questions. What do you think? Oops, that's a different one. I'm not finding it quickly.
It's fine. You got the first part. So I'll answer this. First of all, the premise that the city wants to streamline services by adding a single hauler is not entirely correct. The city is looking into this as a possibility. I think it is worthwhile to discuss things that may involve change. Just because we're discussing them doesn't mean we're going to do them. We need to find a way to do it that serves the community best, and that might be by not doing it at all. When the Single Hauler Trash Committee was instituted about 2 years ago, I was asked by some members of the community to serve on that committee, and I agreed to serve because it was important to me that we had someone who represented the middle ground. I just wanted to look into the question. Does a single hauler benefit the city in any way? And if so, can we structure it in a way that mitigates the damage that some citizens might feel by having their choice taken away? Right now, those projects are getting ready to go out to bid, or they have already gone out to bid. And I would not approve something that did not represent a significant improvement to the existing services in Englewood. So I don't want something that costs more and provides you less. I won't approve that if I'm on council, and the bids may come back with that as the result.
Thank you. This is the last question, and then we'll move to closing statements, and I'm combining 2 questions. And my apologies to those of you whose questions haven't been addressed. So perhaps we can stick around afterwards and you can visit with the candidates. So last question. How do you communicate with your constituents? And how will you handle situations when in what you believe is best, regardless of the opinion of the majority of your constituents? Let's see, it's your turn. No, wait a minute. I gotta look at my paper. It's Mary's turn to start.
Great, thanks. That's one I'd really like to tackle first. So when I was working on policy with the brain injury waiver, I mostly sat back and I was quiet and I absorbed all the info I could. I didn't want to bring other voices to the table at the time. I learned how to bring those voices to the table, but actually physically how to bring them to the table so I could learn what it meant to bring other people's voices to the table and learn from them how I could best speak for them. My thing is to be a good listener. I have learned, like, when you've gotten heat thrown your way, like, there's emotion there. That emotion's great. What's the question that's actually behind it? Is there anything valid behind it? I've learned how to pick apart some of these things and really hear what everybody's saying so that I can ask more questions and follow up. The best listening you can do is asking more questions and not responding fiercely in the beginning. And then thank you.
All right, thank you, Mary. Let's go to Chelsea Newnenkamp.
So to address the first part of the question, you have to have an open door, right? Open door, open email inbox, open phone line. And for me, that looks like not only taking feedback, but actually soliciting it. And so if you're here tonight and you live in District 2, or even if you don't, please go to my website, chelseaforenglewood.com, and sign up to join the mailing list, because I will be sending out information to citizens. I know it was really comforting to me when we were going through the Boyle advisory to get an email from a city council person saying, hey, by the way, this is what's going on. Let me know if you have questions. I want to be responsive in that same way. Also, I want to host events, town halls, open office hours, where we can connect and we also can just get to know each other. It's the beauty of living in a small town, is you can come talk to me at a coffee shop or at the grocery store or anything like that. And then the second part of the question is, what happens if I disagree with maybe what some citizens are telling me? Is part of our representative democracy is not only, you're not electing me to be a robot, to just, take a tally of who the no's and the yeses and vote accordingly. You're electing me to make sound judgment based on my values, based on my intellect, my creativity, and my ability to listen. That's my commitment to you, and my commitment is that my phone line is always open, whether you're happy with me or whether you're not.
Okay, Stephen.
I have to admit that this has been a little bit of a challenge for me since I came on to council. I have a city email address. I have my phone number published on the city website. I get phone calls and I get emails. And generally when somebody calls, I try to answer the phone. I've had a number of telephone conversations or sit-downs with constituents, many of whom I already knew before I came on to council. In the next 4 years, if I'm elected, I intend to do better at that. I want to be in communication with the constituents. I want to hear what they have to say. I won't always agree, but I'm going to do what is best for this city. And if elected, I'm being elected to exercise my judgment on that with your feedback. The other thing is town halls. Town halls are a great way to work with constituents. When you have 8 months on council, I came on to council mid-March, and 2 of those months are immediately preceding the election. There's not a lot of opportunity to hold town halls without looking like you're campaigning using city resources. And I am not interested in doing that. So feel free to email me in the next month if you have a concern. I'd love to talk to you, call, whatever. We can sit down. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim Woodward.
Well, I found that the best ways are email communication, answering questions, phone calls, and in the past we've taken study session nights, and had like a town hall. Certainly in the summer, it's out in the park, under a tent or something like that, and talking about and talking with the community. What is needed? What needs to be changed? For example, if we have a single trash hauler, how will seniors be billed for that? Seniors have trash once every 2 weeks. That's an issue. Kind of going backwards there, but I think the only way to communicate is going back and forth. You can't go to every door. And sometimes I think citizens expect. I didn't know about that. It was all over next door, and it was all over the website. So,
All right, thank you, candidates. It's time to wrap it up for tonight. Let's give them a round of applause. And it's time for our closing statements, and it's back to starting with Chelsea Neunenberg. And she's with District 2, and I'll have to ask a question. Do only people living in District 2 vote in District 2? Or isn't that? Okay, thank you. All right, Chelsea, go for it.
Running a city and shaping a community is not a spectator sport. It's a team sport. And I love being on Team Englewood. I'm running for city council not just to work for you, but to work with you. I want us to cultivate a culture of collaboration and of teamwork in our city between council and citizens and staff and businesses and faith communities and nonprofits. I have seen firsthand throughout my career how citizens can come together and create change that uplifts a community. And we need that kind of teamwork to address the incredible challenges and the opportunities that Englewood has. I look forward to working with you with creativity, with commitment to outcomes, and with collaboration so that we can ensure that Englewood's best days really are ahead of us. Thank you so much for your time tonight. Please come over and say hi to me after.
All right, Stephen Ward, he's running for the position in District 4. He does have an opponent. Her name is Belinda Porter. Go ahead, Stephen.
So the next 4 years for Englewood, a lot of things are going to happen. And I want to be a part of those things as they happen. In the past 6 months or so since I came on the council, we've already accomplished a lot. As I said earlier, we seated the board members for the Downtown Development Authority. We seated the commission members for the Title 16 Commission. I worked behind the scenes with the city manager on any number of issues because I believe that staff needs to be supported in doing their jobs well, whether they are failing or whether they are executing. I believe in complimenting in public and chastising in private. So a lot of what I have done in the last 6 months has been done behind the scenes. I care about the city. I care about the city staff. I want staff to be working in an environment where they feel like they don't have targets painted on their backs. Some other things that we have done, I myself had an experience where somebody dumped an illegal mattress on my fence line, and code enforcement informed me that I was at fault for that, or the perpetrator there. I don't believe that the city should have policies that turn victims into perpetrators, and I spearheaded a change in current policy that allows victims to be compensated when they're victimized by illegal dumping. That's just one of the changes I've made so far, and I intend to continue working for you in the next 4 years if you elect me. Thank you.
Thank you. And Jim Woodward, who is seeking an at-large seat.
Unlike Steve, I'm only looking at the next 2 years on council. Mary and I are running for a 2-year seat. I've been committed to this community for a long time and have volunteered for a lot of different things throughout, and I think I've proven my knowledge, proven my commitment to the city and its residents, and I would ask for your vote on November 2nd or before, mail-in ballot. Appreciate what's gone on tonight, and thank you for having me.
Thank you. And Mary Colecki, also seeking the at-large seat for the 2-year term.
Thank you, and thank you to the Women's Voting League and to Sacred Grace Church for hosting this event again. Thank you so, so much. I do believe that I was called to run for this to maintain choices in our community, and we do have a small community that is very, very near and dear to my heart, and I do love a lot of the things going on in it. I also feel that I will be able to lean on my citizens, fellow citizens, to give me the background and knowledge I need and give me their point of view, as I feel like we are truly citizens who run into each other all the time. And I will be bringing that back to the table. And I look forward to serving for 2 years and seeing what I can do for change for our community. And I look forward to chatting with everybody, and I have loved really hitting that really hard-hitting questions from everybody and talking to them what they really care about. So I much appreciate this time. So thank you.
Thank you. And I'd like to acknowledge all of our audience for their questions and your interest in civic affairs in your city and your community. You obviously care about it, and that's to be acknowledged and set an example for everyone. Thank you to you folks up here who provided us all kinds of information tonight. Thank you to my timers over here who helped us out. And thank you to Sacred Grace Church for hosting this event this evening, and on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Arapahoe and Douglas County, we wish you a good evening and a successful voting season. Good night.